Today, we're going to answer the question, can I even qualify to buy a house after my divorce? This is a really good question that I get specifically from people who are in the middle of trying to figure out where they're going to go after a divorce. Divorce will absolutely be a life-changing event, and life-changing events change everything from finances to emotions to family structure. And so the question, am I going to be able to buy a house after my divorce, is something that's really scary for people. Nobody wants to take a step back in life. And after a divorce, especially if you own a home with another person, you go from having two incomes to one. Or in some cases, you were the breadwinner in your family, and now you're going to have to provide for your ex and maybe some child support. Finances get really funky. So asking the question early and often, will I be able to qualify to buy a house, is really important. We've got to ask that question. To answer it really quickly here in the first minute of this video, I don't know if you will. The best thing that I can tell you to do is to reach out to a lender. And specifically, I like to tell people to reach out to a lender that have experience in the divorce world, because when you're divorcing, and if a divorce has already been filed, then you've really got to start working with your co-parent, with your co-person, with your ex, to figure out your family finances. Because if a divorce is filed and the county has record of it, and you called a lender and you're like, hey, I want to buy a house, they're going to pull up all of the information on you that's available in public record. And if you're in Missouri and Kansas like I am, everything's public record. Everything from, hey, Rebecca's getting divorced, to here's the settlement for my divorce. You can pretty much see everything on there. And a lender who's going to be giving you money to purchase a large asset is absolutely going to do their research. So it's best in the very beginning to call and have an honest conversation with someone you trust who has experience in the field, where you can say, hey, I want to know if I can buy a house based on my current finances. So I'm going to give you a few examples here of people who have done this, because I'm seeing over and over again now, as home equity is increasing and people are in better financial situations, that they are buying before, during, and after a divorce. It's absolutely plausible, but you do need to be careful with your personal finances. As I always tell you all, one of the first things you have to do is look at your marriage and the assets you're coming out with, being the equity in your current home, your cars, your card payments, boats, second houses, retirement funds. All of those things come into play whenever you're purchasing a home, because you are going to have to turn around and do things like a down payment on a new house. You may need to pay off some credit card debt. You're going to have new expenses coming in that do affect your personal financial situation to be able to purchase. In our states, which is the only one I can legally talk about right now, there's kind of a rule called 1 to buy, 2 to sell, which means if I decide to go purchase a home, I can technically do it on my own. As long as somebody gives me a loan for the house, I'm good to go. I could go buy a house right now if I'm married or not married, and I wouldn't technically have to tell my spouse to it. Now, what's going to happen whenever I purchase a home is it's going to say on the title and on the mortgage and on the loan that Rebecca Green, mer. And what that mer means is it's either going to say Rebecca Green, a married person, purchased this piece of property, or Rebecca Green, a single person, purchased this piece of property. If you are going through a divorce, you are still a married person. It's kind of a funny example, but you're either pregnant or not pregnant. In the same way, a court system and a lender is going to say you're either married or not married. Well, that's it. Those are the only options. So if you go out, you buy a home as a person who's going through a divorce, it's going to record on title Rebecca Green, a married person. Why is that? Because any asset that you acquire in a marriage is a marital asset. So if you've decided that you don't want to rent, you want to go buy a house while you're in the middle of this divorce, that's fine. Just keep in mind that your spouse is going to have to sign a few documents stating, hey, this is Rebecca's house. I don't have any legal liability or entitlement to the house. There's some very specific deeds that have to be recorded after your divorce is finalized, and we can work with a title company in the area on what those are. But I'll tell you from personal experience, I've had people really close to me who go out, who buy houses post-divorce or in the middle of their divorce, and if their spouse does not sign a document saying, I have no legal entitlement to that house, then when they go to sell that house or whatever down the road, their spouse, who they were married to when they purchased this house, even though the divorce was happening, is going to have to sign some documents. It gets messy, especially if it wasn't a clean divorce. So just know you can buy a house during your divorce if your finances are such on your own that that's not a problem. Now, one thing that's going to play a factor here is your marital home. If you own a home with the person that you're divorcing, the lender is going to take that into account. So you've got one of two things. You either need a marital statement that says, hey, my spouse is keeping the house, they're fully legally liable to make the mortgage payments, and so I can move on, or you need to have this finalized. There's also a possibility, happens a lot of times, especially with people getting married later in life, that maybe one spouse is on the loan for the house, but both spouses are on the title. If one person works and the other person hasn't worked, then it does happen a lot of times actually. So if the wife's the only one on the loan of the marital house and she goes to buy a new house, now she has two loans in her name. Typically, a lender is not going to like that unless your finances are such that you can technically cover both mortgages. That's where the separation agreement is really important. A separation agreement is something that's in writing, notarized, signed by an attorney, that's really put in place to help both spouses be able to make some decisions to move on, because divorce is a lengthy process. And a lot of life happens while you're in the middle of a divorce. So, most financial institutions and attorneys and jobs do respect a signed divorce settlement agreement, a decree of some kind stating, hey, this is what we're going to do with our house. That would allow you, as the out spouse, the person moving out of the house, to be able to move on with your life and look to purchase a property. Something that does also happen sometimes in really clean breaks is both couples might say, hey, we want to sell the house. Now, when you do that, if you sell the house and there's a pile of money from the proceeds, you could say to the title company, look, we don't have everything figured out right now, but we do both want to split the assets from this house. As long as everybody agrees, then I've had clients who will be like, hey, I'm selling the family home. I want to get moved into a new property. I'm not saying I'm going to be there forever, but it feels better than renting. So they'll take their $60,000 from the equity of the home that they've just sold with their spouse, or lay that into a new purchase. And again, as long as the spouse signs off with, hey, we sold that house, you go live your life, buy a new house wherever you want. As long as everybody is in agreement with what that looks like, you're good. Now, where you could get yourself into trouble is if you go buy a house without your spouse knowing. Or if you're not all the way divorced yet and you start filling out loan applications. I mean, I've had people call me in tears all the time. I have people call me in tears and are like, I just got his mortgage application because it came to my house because it was still his record on file. What you have to know is you and your spouse are still kind of like in business together. As much as you don't want to be, you're still in business together, especially if there's kids. But in this situation, let's say there's no kids, you're just divorcing and separating and both moving on with your lives. You still need to be very careful that you're being transparent with this person, and that the business moves, that's the best way I can say it, the business moves that you're making while you're still married are above board. And if you decide not to disclose that you're purchasing a home while you're getting divorced, you're really getting yourself in a lot of hot water. I have seen it happen, and it gets messy in the end because all marital assets are owned through the marriage, and both people own them. No matter how many emails or text messages that you send, hey, buy a house, I'm so happy for you, there are legal documents that have to be signed that'll get messy in the end if you choose to do that without full disclosure. So that's the answer to can I buy a house while I'm divorcing? Absolutely, you can if your finances look in a way that you'll be able to do that, and I'm cheering for you to do so.